agrees it should be allowed. Well, what is the controversy about same-sex marriage? Let me say just a few words, since that is such a debated issue, especially here in California. First, what are the countries where same-sex marriage is allowed? Do you know? In Canada, it is legal. Where else? Okay, let me tell you, we'll make it shorter. Same-sex marriage was first made legal in the Netherlands in the year 2000, or 2001. And then in Belgium, a couple of years later, Belgium, the Netherlands, two small countries in Northern Europe. Then the third country to make same-sex marriage legal was Spain, and immediately after that, Canada. In Canada, it had already been legal in some provinces, but nationwide, it was 2005, summer of 2005, together with Spain. And then it was made legal in other countries, in Norway, and then recently in Portugal, and it's legal in some states in the US, but in the US, it is legal, but it is not full rights marriage, because the federal government doesn't recognize, as of today, as of the year 2010, the federal government does not recognize all of the rights to same-sex couples. So yes, they are recognized as married couples in Massachusetts and Vermont, wherever, but they cannot marry anyone from another country, for example, because they wouldn't be allowed to come into the country because the federal government doesn't allow that. So it's not full rights marriage. So that's the situation of same-sex marriage in the world. Now, what is the whole debate about same-sex marriage? Well, let me make a distinction between fundamental rights and other rights, general rights, or rights which are not fundamental. Some rights are not fundamental, and they can be restricted. You can be deprived of certain rights, at least temporarily. There may be a curfew for a number of reasons, so your freedom of movement may be limited. However, there are some rights which are absolutely fundamental, even more than the right to freedom. Even some rights are extremely fundamental. The right to life, even the right to life can be suspended at some point. People can be executed in this country in certain states. Well, believe it or not, the right to marriage is considered one of those fundamental rights, to such an extent that the US Supreme Court ruled a few years ago that even people on death row cannot be denied the right to marry. Even terrorists, the worst criminals, the worst murderers, cannot be deprived of that fundamental right. However, gay people can be deprived of that right. Now, the answer to that is usually that they can marry people of the opposite sex. There's no discrimination. But that's a fallacy. Why is that a fallacy? First of all, because technically that is not even true. If a man and a woman go to marry, and when they are about to get their marriage license, they make it public officially. No, people don't do that, but if they were to test the law, say, well, I want you to know, I want this judge to know that I am a lesbian or that I am gay. That marriage could technically not take place because it would be fraud, it would be fraudulent marriage. So technically speaking, unless the gay person hides his or her orientation, marriage with the opposite sex is not a possibility for gay people either, which means they are being deprived of a fundamental right that not even terrorists or the worst criminals are deprived of. Okay? So that's the whole thing about gay marriage, about same-sex marriage. And now we move on to the specifically religious section of our discussion. Here we're going to see what we're going to specifically talk of homosexuality in relation to Christianity, and then we're going to see the position of the Catholic Church specifically, by extension also other major Christian institutions, Christian denominations, but more specifically the Catholic Church, because it encompasses most of Christians, over half of all Christians, so it's just a matter of numbers. The Bible, this is a Bible. I'm sure you know what a Bible looks like. you may not know. Sometimes you have Hindu, Muslim people, they don't need to be necessarily acquainted with the Christian Bible. This is the Bible. The Bible is made up of many books. So the word Bible means books. That's where you get bibliography, okay? Or in Spanish, biblioteca, place of books, Bible. So it's many books in a single volume. And we have the Old Testament, which roughly amounts to the same as the Jewish scriptures. So for Christians, the Jewish scriptures, which Christians call the Old Testament. Old Testament really meaning old covenant between humans, between humanity and God. Encompasses most of the Bible. It's 42 books. The Jewish people count only 20-something books, but it's just a different counting, the same texts. So this is the Old Testament, that's the Old Covenant, so to say, which for Christians becomes superseded by the New Covenant, which encompasses 27 books, beginning with 4 Gospels, meaning 4 accounts of the lives and the life and deeds of Jesus, and then a number of writings by his followers. Okay, the word gospel means good spell, good news. So we're going to look at how homosexuality or same-sex sexual activity is seen in the Old Testament, that is in the Jewish scriptures, and in the New Testament, in the Christian scriptures. In the Old Testament, the most important passage that we have is one which deals with the city of Sodom, S-O-D-O-M, Sodom. That's where we get the name sodomy for same-sex sexual activity in past times. And it is in the first book of the Bible, which is called Genesis, a word which has to do with genetics, gene, beginnings, the very first book of the Bible, chapter 19, the depravity of Sodom. Let me read to you. Here we have that Lot, L-O-T, Lot, we are told a just man, had moved with his family to Sodom, the city which God later destroyed because of its depravity. But he gave Lot and his wife and his two daughters the opportunity to leave the city before it was destroyed by fire and hail. Okay? And so we are told that Lot was sitting in the square of this town, and then 2 angels in the form of men came to the town, and Lot invited them to his home to spend the night. The 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. He said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you can rise early and go on your way." They said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly. So they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread. And they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house. And they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them." Lot went out of the door to them, shut the door after him, and said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." But they replied, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came here as an alien, and he's going to play the judge? Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Then they pressed hard against the man Lot, and came near the door to break it down. But the men inside reached out their hands, and brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the door of the house, both small and great, so that they were unable to find the door. So what is it that strikes you as strange about this episode? Weird, funny.
The entire town wants them.
All of the men, doesn't say anything about women, but all of the men